Good afternoon, and thank you for being here, especially to my congressional colleagues who stand behind me, willing to confront one of the greatest threats facing our nation today. Sharia, a culture of violence and domination totally incompatible with individual freedoms, our Constitution, and our heritage. Chip Roy and I have launched the Sharia-Free America Caucus because Texas is ground zero in this fight. Here's what's happening right now in the Lone Star State. There are multiple Muslim-only housing developments that already exist or are in the planning stages, including the Meadows, Epic City, right there in my district. It's currently under investigation by the state of Texas. An Islamic imam in Dallas called the police on a fellow Muslim for simply talking to a Christian pastor. An imam in the Houston area was filmed threatening to occupy stores that sold goods that are incompatible with Sharia. Just yesterday, at a taxpayer-funded high school in my district, an Islamic group set up a booth during the school day to pass out Qurans. Unauthorized, they did that. These examples multiply daily. The spread has gotten so serious that on March the 3rd, a proposition to ban Sharia will appear on the Texas primary ballot. And I encourage all Texans to go to and vote for that proposition. Because as Texas goes, so goes the nation, and as the nation goes, so goes the world. This is not just a Texas problem. Sharia is on the march across America, from Arizona to Minnesota, Alabama, Florida, and beyond. No state is safe. As of today, our Sharia-Free America Caucus consists of 33 members of Congress from 18 different states. That's over a third of the country. It also has the support of Senator Tuberville, who is here today and has been one of the leading voices against the threat of Sharia. In fact, this caucus grew out of a conversation that he and I had at the White House Christmas party. If we do not fight back, Sharia will dominate our culture, and America will no longer be America. A nation that millions have fought and died for, a nation that I served in the U.S. Army for 25 years on active duty, a nation that is the freest nation ever in the history of humankind. Look no further than France and the United Kingdom. Through unchecked immigration, they've been overrun. These once great nations are losing their heritage, their culture, and their freedoms. Sharia divides, then conquers. Under it, there's no true freedom of religion or speech, no equal rights, and women are second-class citizens. Don't take my word for it. Consider the explanatory memorandum on the general strategic goal for the group in North America, a 1991 document written by a Muslim Brotherhood leader, uncovered in a federal terrorism investigation. This is the written, formal plan to dominate and replace our culture in the United States. Take a look for yourself. My staff has passed out a one-pager with some of the key points and a link to the document itself. There are 7 pieces of legislation introduced that would ban Sharia from the United States, safeguard our immigration and legal systems from Sharia infiltration, deport foreign nationals who adhere to Sharia, and correctly list both the Muslim Brotherhood and CAIR, the Council for American Islamic Relations, as foreign terrorist organizations. As John Adams said, our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Today, we are witnessing the reality of Adam's wisdom in the clash of cultures as outsiders stream into our country with no idea to assimilate into our culture, our laws, or our way of life. It is time to ban Sharia, defend our country, and save Western civilization. Thank you, and I yield to my Senate colleague from the great state of Alabama, Senator Tuberville. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to my colleagues from the House. I wish to have more of my colleagues from the Senate here. This is a very, very important caucus, and it will grow. It's going to have to do that. It is just unfortunate, but folks, wake up, America. We got to wake up. The enemy is inside the gates. it is very, very important that we start to understand every day of how important this is. Important to us, our kids, and our grandkids, and the future of this great nation. 250 years that we've made it. But we're being attacked every day, and it's growing. But our side needs to grow also and fight back. There's a silent revolution that's going on in our country. We have to remember that radical Islam is not a religion. It is a political organization run by terrorists. No easy way to put it. Islamic extremism is infiltrating the U.S. and refusing to assimilate. But what's even darker than that, many of them are openly admitting that they are here with the intent to destroy our country and to kill Americans. They couldn't put it any more clear. This is not a secret. The Quran instructs them to kill all infidels. It specifically encourages them to behead all infidels. If you're not a Muslim, they don't want you here. It provides clear instructions about how they are to steal from non-Muslims. It's no wonder that a group of Somalians have been accused of stealing, 18 billion to this point, and growing, as President Trump says. Roughly 5 million Muslims live in this country, in the United States of America, and on the rise. We do have people who are Muslims in this country, of Muslim descent, who do not practice Sharia law, and they are welcome because they want to assimilate to our culture. But woke cities like Michigan, Minnesota, and New Jersey are replacing American civic norms with radical Islamic policies. Minneapolis became the first major U.S. city to allow amplified Islamic calls to prayer year-round. Noise ordinance be damned. This type of practice is not even allowed in most Muslim countries. Why do they do it here? They want to be seen and heard. They want to be on television. They want to rally the troops, which begs the question, if people like Ilhan Omar love this way of life back home, why don't you just move the hell back? This is our country. Our grandparents built this country. 250 years. This is our birthday, and we do not want to change to a third world country. Radical Islam is fundamentally incompatible with the American way of life. We have to start understanding that. It does not work. They do not want it to work. Islamic would like to see every Christian and freedom-loving American convert to Islam or face death. Not to mention the horrible ways that they regularly abuse women and children. If you're a man in their cult, you can marry a 8, 9, 10-year-old girl. Do we not understand that this does not fit in our culture? Where is the feminists? Where are they at? It's time to wake up. Enough's enough, or we're going to lose our country. The press can call me an Islamophobe all they want. I don't care. It doesn't make me any difference. I love this country. I love what it stands for. I love that it's a Christian nation, and it's going to stay that way. What's happened to our brethren overseas in Europe? They've lost it. They've lost their way of life. And to get it back, how are they going to have to get it back? They're going to have to fight on the streets. They're going to have to take it back if they want to take it back. And I don't know whether their leadership wants that. But by God, we're not going to let that happen in our country. We're not going to let it get to that point. We're going to recognize it, and we're going to fight back before that gets to that point. Thanks to President Trump, he's made it a priority to stop illegal and even legal third world people coming into our country. Why do they want to come here? They don't want to come here for a better life. They want to change our life to something else, and it does not work that way. We have to make that decision, and it's going to take a group of people like this to do it. It's time to stand up. It's time to be recognized. It's time to be loud, because if we don't do it, in the very near future, we're going to look like Europe. We're going to look like some of these other countries that have lost their way of life. And we owe it. We owe it to the people that built this country and owe it to our kids and grandkids to save this country from this cult that has taken over every second of every day. They're making progress, and we need to stop that cult as we see it today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. And now recognize the co-founder of this caucus, Chip Roy.
Well, thank you, Keith, and thank you, Senator. Thanks for joining us here in the lower house. Look, I'm not going to take a whole lot of time. I want to be very clear. I am proud to be with this group of Americans, of colleagues, many of whom wore the uniform in defense of our nation and in defense of our nation against radical Islamic terrorists who wanted to destroy our country and destroy what we know about Western civilization. And now that same war is being conducted against us, but from within. And anybody who's actually paying attention to this and understands the intentions of the Muslim Brotherhood and follows and looks at the writings and what these folks are talking about, Dallas, Houston, Texas is ground zero. That's why Keith Self and I joined together to create this Sharia-Free Caucus, Sharia-Free America Caucus, because we understand that the root strength of this country is our Judeo-Christian principles and the values of Western civilization that have advanced the cause of liberty, freedom, and prosperity for people around the world. And our ancestors bled and died so that we could live in a country like this. And you can believe whatever you want, but you cannot engage in what is a political effort to Islamify the United States of America and not expect us to fight back and say no. Sharia is inconsistent with Western civilization. Sharia is inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States, the Declaration, and the rule of law in our country. That is why we've been putting forward legislation. My friend Randy Fine from Florida put forward legislation to ban Sharia in our courts. We put legislation to say that we shouldn't have tax advantage status for CARE, who has direct ties to terrorist activities around the world. We put forward legislation to pause immigration until we've have an immigration system that vets people for adherence to Sharia law. These are the kinds of things that the American people expect us to do to defend this country. They're the kinds of things that we will do in the Sharia-Free America Caucus. And to stand up and let the voices of the American people be heard, that we're not going to be cowed by groups coming in and trying to make places where there are no-go zones for our women in the state of Texas. Those occur. Those are occurring right now in Arlington, in Plano, in places that are strongholds and bastions of our values as Texans and as Americans. We have women, Texans, who are afraid to go to certain areas. That's not going to happen. We're not going to let Dallas or Houston or any other city in this great country become what has happened to London and to Paris. We are going to fight for this country. And that's what I'm proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with these great men and women to say that we're going to do. And I'm not going to allow the Constitution to be, frankly, misapplied and hid behind to say that I've got to throw aside 250 years of our core Judeo-Christian principles. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Biggs.
Thank you to Representative Self and Representative Roy for organizing this caucus. I'm grateful to them, their leadership, and I'm grateful to stand shoulder to shoulder with these men and women. I want to be very clear here. This discussion is not about the freedom to practice religion. It is about governance. It is about law. It is preservation of constitutional order in the United States of America. It is, do we reverence where we came from and where we should be going? That is the Judeo-Christian ethic. I think back on John Locke or Montesquieu, these philosophers of political theology, if you will. They were the basis upon which this country's Constitution was formed. And there is nothing perhaps more antithetical to that than this notion of Sharia. When we examine Sharia as a political and legal system, it is clearly incompatible with core American principles, including individual liberty, equal protection under the law, freedom of speech, and the separation of powers. Our Constitution is the supreme law of the land. We all adhere to that. No legal framework, foreign or domestic, can be permitted to undermine it. Safeguarding our legal system is not intolerance, it is responsibility. And that's what we stand up for. A nation that fails to defend its constitutional framework will ultimately and invariably lose it. The Sharia-Free America Caucus exists to ensure that American law remains American, rooted in our Constitution, enforced equally, and protected from ideological systems that reject those foundations. And make no mistake, Sharia rejects America's foundational roots, the Judeo-Christian ethic. It rejects all of the liberal Western tradition. This is a legitimate, lawful, and necessary effort, and I'm honored to be a part of it. I'm grateful that they would allow me to be part of it. I am now grateful to my good friend, fellow Arizonan, Eli Crane, and I flip it to you, brother.
Thank you guys for coming today. I want to start by thanking Representative Chip Roy and Keith Self for founding the Sharia-Free America Caucus. While our foreign policy objectives are rightfully shifting toward the Western Hemisphere and China, it's critical that we don't ignore the growing threat posed by dangerous legal and political ideologies. We would be foolish to let Washington doctrine of interventionism overshadow our responsibility to protect our interests from within our own borders. As someone who served in the Middle East, I've seen firsthand that Sharia law cannot coexist with Western values and our constitutional republic. Proponents of this extremist framework believe in a mandate to dominate those who won't conform to their belief system. This conflicts with core American principles such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and human rights. Although many European nations have surrendered to this coercive ideology, America still has an opportunity to learn from their mistakes and correct our course. If we fail to act, we risk eroding our freedoms to appease those who refuse to respect or operate within our constitutional system. That is why I'm honored to join these patriots who understand the gravity of the situation as a member of the Sharia-Free America Caucus. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Mr. Harris.
Well, thank you. It is my pleasure to be here, and my thanks to Congressman Roy and Congressman Self and their founding of this Sharia-Free America Caucus. Let me be clear this afternoon. Radical Islam poses a threat not only in places like Mondami's, New York, but right in my home state of North Carolina, and is spreading across the United States. Just this past New Year's Eve, in my 8th District of North Carolina, the FBI foiled a planned terrorist attack. Christian Sturdivant, an 18-year-old from Mint Hill, North Carolina, a suburban town in my district, intended to use knives and hammers to massacre people at a local grocery store and a fast food restaurant. He had pledged his allegiance to ISIS at the young age of 14, aspired to martyrdom, and hoped to kill as many people as possible before dying at the hands of police. This is real life. Thank God the Charlotte FBI intercepted this plot in time. But this incident should alarm every American. An impressionable young man in our own North Carolina community was radicalized by violent Islamic ideology. Picture families losing loved ones while simply celebrating an American holiday or running errands. That's the deadly hatred radical Islam fuels. We also see troubling signs of broader influence, including sympathy for Sharia law over the United States Constitution. A poll by the Center for Security Policy found that over half of U.S. Muslims surveyed believe Muslims should have the option of Sharia courts or tribunals instead of or alongside American courts. While views vary and many American Muslims fully embrace our constitutional system, Substantial support for Sharia among Muslims indicate alignment with Islamist political goal and Islamic theocracy. Key ideologies and extreme adherence to Sharia law include 1. Honor killings and stoning for adultery. 2. Death penalty for apostasy or leaving Islam. 3. Polygamy as permissible. And 4. Corporal punishments like stoning, lashing, or amputation for crimes such as theft, blasphemy, or adultery. Radical Islam has no place in America. We must remain vigilant and firmly reject hateful ideologies that promote violence against innocents. Our safety and our values depend on it. Thank you.
I now introduce the whip of the House of Representatives, Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Keith. I want to begin by thanking my good friends and colleagues, Keith Self and Chip Roy, for their leadership in launching the Sharia-Free America Caucus. I joined the group last month after the Somali fraud in my home state of Minnesota became a national example of what happens when we allow anti-American ideologies to take root in our communities. But this has been an issue near and dear to my heart for nearly 20 years. I introduced a bill that banned Sharia law from being incorporated in certain Minnesota government services during my time as a state legislator. Now I'm proud to continue that work here in the U.S. House of Representatives as a member of this newly formed Sharia-Free America Caucus. When people migrate to this great country, they have a duty to assimilate to our culture. And if they refuse, we have a duty to defend the core values that make our country the greatest in the world. Make no mistake, Sharia isn't something that solely exists in the Middle East or Western Europe. It's happening right here in our own backyards. In 2017, there were reports of a man in Minneapolis recruiting other young men to impose Sharia law in their community. This is serious, and it's why we're here today delivering a strong yet very simple message. Sharia has absolutely no place here in the United States of America. Not now, not ever. It's imperative that we make sure this oppressive, dangerous, and radical ideology never gains a foothold in our country. And I'm proud to join this all-star group of members to continue fighting the important fight right here in Congress. And with that, I turn it back to Keith Self.
Thank you, Mr. Whip. Now recognize Mr. Perry.
Well, thank my colleagues for being here, and I'm proud to stand right beside them. Thanks, Chip and Keith, for putting this together. Look, in the 1780s, President Jefferson sent an envoy to Europe to find out why our ships were being taken captive and their crew taken slave on the Barbary Coast. And we met the Muslims. He said, well, we don't have any beef with you. We've never been opposed to you. We didn't participate in the Crusades. Why do you enslave our people? And the representative for their community said, well, we looked at the Quran, and you are infidels, so we can take you slaves. And Thomas Jefferson said, well, okay, we're going to deal with that. And, of course, the rest is the history, and you can listen to the Marine Corps song and hear that history. Ladies and gentlemen, I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and therefore I cannot be for Sharia. Sharia means the law. That's what the definition of Sharia. Islam means submission to Allah. That's what that means. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not for honor killings. I am not for stoning women, for adultery. I am not for child marriage and child rape. I am not for forcing women to veil and become slaves and chattel. I am not for any of these things, so I must be against Sharia. Sharia has no place in our country. God bless you, and I'll be followed by the great soon-to-be Senator Barry Moore.
Thank you, General Perry. Not on our watch. If you look at Europe now, we think this can't happen, right? I mean, this can't happen in America. Well, ask London and Paris. We're told now you can't get 30-year money over there. They're destroying those communities, and it's here in our backyard. And so we need to make sure, folks, and Chip, thank you for this. And Keith, I appreciate you doing this. I'm excited to be a part of this fight, and it's for our kids and our grandkids that we're doing this. It's for our wives and our children. That's the future, and that's the fight we're in. And so with that, I'll just say America has one law. That's the United States Constitution. It applies equally to every person, in every case. Sharia law is not a religious system. It is a legal framework that, where enforced, restricts basic freedoms that Americans are given by God in our Constitution. Sharia law targets women, religious minorities, and political dissenters. The principles of Sharia law are fundamentally incompatible with our Constitution's rights and our legal protections under the law. Due process and freedom of speech. That's what Sharia law is against. No foreign or religious legal code should ever influence American courts or create a parallel system of justice. Sharia law must not be allowed to override the Constitution. America doesn't bend itself to radical ideologies, and we must always protect liberty and the United States of America. And with that,
Mr. Gill, fellow Texan.
Sharia law and radical Islam have no place in the United States. You know, there's a fundamental truth that I think we've got to recognize, which is that not all cultures are created equal, and they are not all equally compatible with America's governing framework. The reality is that radical Islam as a political ideology has a very different conception of freedom of speech than we have in the United States, a very different conception of freedom of religion, of separation of church and state, or of mosque and state. Islam as a political ideology is inherently imperialistic, and we see that now, unfortunately, all over the Western world. And I think the question that is, why are we seeing this in the West, and why are we seeing this in the United States? Why are we seeing terrorist attacks from radical Islam within our own borders? Where did this come from? Islam is largely alien to American history. It certainly didn't come into the United States on the Mayflower. It's something that we deliberately imported as a matter of immigration policy into our country. And it's going to destroy us just like it's destroying Europe right now. It's our job to stand up to that, to stand up for our values and to prohibit alien cultures and alien ideologies that do not comport with our own governing framework. And that's why I'm proud to be part of the Sharia-Free America Caucus. So thank you.
And fellow Texan, Mr. Cloud.
We all know America is the envy of the world. And the reason it is because of the set of ideals upon which this nation was built. You know, it's been said often that many nations are the product of history or geography, and that the United States is a product of these wonderful ideals that we have embraced. And while we are a most welcoming nation, we welcome all people to come here and to be a part and to contribute and to build up and to espouse those ideals and continue to advance those ideals from generation to generation. And for this nation to continue to be a city on a hill for all generations and the rest of the world to see. But what we will not allow us to do is, even as we secure our borders and as we see the Trump administration reestablishing our national security footprint across the world, is to allow our country to be undermined within our borders. And for people to come to this country not wanting to assimilate, not wanting to espouse those values or advance those values, but instead coming to this country because they want to advance their own ideology, to create parallel communities, to create a parallel legal system, and one that ultimately is designed to undermine the very foundation that this country is built upon, is something that we will not stand for. And so this caucus is an alarm bell to the things that are going on in many of our states and many of our communities, and a sounding alarm for us to take action and for the communities to take action, and for everyone to stand up and make sure that we continue to be a nation of, by, and for the people, and embracing those values that this nation were dependent on. It's been said that even here today that all these ideologies do not produce equal results. They are not equal. I will just point out that no one is afraid of a Christian martyr. No one is afraid of a Jewish martyr. We are very concerned about a radical Islamic martyr. And so there is a difference in the ideologies. And we will do everything we can to protect the values this country were built upon. And I thank you for establishing this caucus.
Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Congressman Self, Congressman Roy, for being the point people on this. It's an honor to stand with you and the rest of my colleagues here. You know, we don't like to admit when we're wrong. But I'm going to admit to you where I was wrong. This goes back to somewhere around 2009, 2010. I was a state Senate caucus leader in my home state of Idaho, and someone brought me this legislation, and it was American Law for American Courts, and it talked about this thing called Sharia. I had never even heard of Sharia law. And at the time, I'm thinking, okay, we got a full agenda here. This is a solution in search of a problem, right? I was wrong. Since then, it's manifested itself in multiple places across this country. You heard some of the examples brought up by some of my colleagues, but in particular in Texas, Minnesota, New Jersey, where this has manifested itself and become a direct conflict with American law. And so we cannot have this in our country where it's incompatible with the foundational principles of this nation. And that's exactly what it is. Our human rights, our Christian values, what's made this country prosperous and great is in conflict with Sharia. I'm proud to join the members of this caucus, help raise the visibility for this issue, and it's important not only to our constituents but to all of Americans. And I'm proud to be part of it.
Mrs. Miller.
Thank you. I'm here today to address a serious issue facing our country, one that the Democrat Party and the fake news media would rather ignore. Across America, we are seeing a dangerous and deliberate effort to normalize ideologies that are hostile to our Constitution and our way of life. The result of mass migration from regions that reject Western values has brought with it growing attempts to impose Sharia law on our communities. This is an ideology fundamentally incompatible with our Constitution, individual liberty, and the principles upon which our country, America, was founded. Yet Democrats continue to push an agenda that invites these destructive worldviews to take root in our communities. That means opening our borders, disregarding our founding principles, and silencing us, the American people. We will not allow it. We will not be silent. By God's grace, the United States will remain a nation governed by a constitution, not by a foreign religious law. I am proud to join the Sharia-Free America Caucus to stand alongside my colleagues in defense of our God-given freedoms, our heritage, and the principles that have made America the greatest nation on earth. And Congressman Clyde?
Thank you, Representative Miller, and thank you to Rep. Chip Roy and to Keith Self for your leadership on this critical issue, including launching the Sharia-Free America Caucus. I'm proud to be a member and to join you all in this fight. Here in America, there is only one supreme law of the land, and that is the United States Constitution. We all took an oath to support and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that's why we're here today, to uphold that oath by combating the danger that is Sharia law. Sharia represents a clear and present danger to our country. It is simply incompatible with the Constitution, the values we hold dear as Americans, and the very foundations of Western civilization. Radical Islam has long posed a threat to Western culture and our American way of life. The spread of Sharia is the latest saga in this ongoing battle, one that must be won for the spiritual, societal, and political well-being of future generations. Let me be clear. Sharia law and radical Islam have no, and I mean no, place in America. This is not a religion. It is a violent, barbaric, and ruthless ideology and form of government, one that will destroy our great nation if we do not act, and act now. That's why we must be vigilant in preserving our American way of life, which includes taking on those who would seek to destroy it. Many of these radicals took full advantage of Joe Biden's open borders and weak immigration policies, while President Trump continues taking bold, decisive action on this issue to rescue our nation. Congress must now follow suit. The Sharia-Free American Caucus represents a key turning point in this process. We're unified in defending the West, banning Sharia, and protecting our American way of life. Those who want Sharia law are trying to get it accepted in civil law first, kind of like the camel's nose under the tent.
but the real goal is total replacement of Western ideology in our constitutional republic. Western civilization is worth defending, and Americans have stepped up to that challenge for over 250 years now. I'm proud to stand with my colleagues in the Sharia-Free America Caucus as we continue this righteous fight by guaranteeing this dangerous foreign ideology, which represents a clear and present danger that we must root out of America once and for all. And I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Burkeen.
Thank you to Representative Self, Representative Roy. There is a political correctness that is trying to whitewash history, and there are people that scoff at a creation of something they say is a non-issue. And so you don't have to go back to George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or John Adams or James Madison, who were dealing with a ideology, strict ideology that wanted to kill the infidel. And you can find that in our historical fabric, and the constant payment required of the United States until we finally said enough when we went to war over it. But in the last 20 years, I find it shocking people forget 9/11 and strict adherence to Islam, and the Boston Massacre, strict adherence to Islam. And so this whitewashing and trying to allow political correctness to keep us from proclaiming and going public, and people in elected office feeling like they cannot adequately represent what they're hearing in their coffee shops, what they're hearing at a tire shop. Just 2 weeks ago, I'm getting a trailer tire fixed, and I'm having a conversation because the average person in Oklahoma understands the danger and the threat of true adherence to the Quran. So because I think we're 10 years always behind Europe on liberal ideology, here's a few things you cannot scoff at. The United Arab Emirates no longer, the UAE itself is no longer funding its students to study in the United Kingdom for fear of them being radicalized by the United Kingdom's Muslim Brotherhood. In the Middle East, they're afraid of what's happened in Europe and the direct adherence to Islam that they're seeing in Europe. In that same country, in England, an English detective, chief inspector, witnessing the abuse of a young girl in a car, subsequently being ordered by a supervisor to drop the matter to avoid antagonizing the local Muslim community, trying to PC a horrible situation. An Austrian court ruled that Sharia law can be used for arbitration in private contracts. All right, well, what about the United States? A U.S.-based Muslim cleric teaching, quote, having sex with a 9-year-old girl is not considered sexual harassment and is permissible in Islam. Many people have seen this floating around. A Muslim imam in Texas being caught on video harassing local business owners for selling pork and other products considered forbidden or haram. In Dearborn, Michigan, a Muslim mayor told a Christian minister he did not belong in their town after the Christian voiced opposition to renaming a street after a radical Islamic Hamas freedom fighter. And as Governor of Texas, Governor Abbott said that there are issuing orders from courts that are carrying the authority to bind individuals to Islamic code currently versus American law, constitutional law, the common law that you find in the Constitution. And so grateful to the people that are going to continue to sound the alarm, to not go quiet, and understand that recent history is something we have to still be concerned about. Whether it be 9/11, the Boston Massacre, what happened in Louisiana not long ago in 2025, we have to keep our eyes wide open. Thank you. And with that, following me, Representative Norman.
I want to thank Chip and Keith for forming this caucus. I'm proud to be here. You know, the United States was founded on the Constitution, legal order, and the God-given freedoms of every individual. Those principles are not negotiable, not now, not ever. Sharia law is not simply a matter of personal belief. It is a political and a legal system that allows religious doctrine above civil authority. That is fundamentally incomparable with our Constitution, which guarantees equal protection and liberty under one uniform rule of law. Some say raising this concern is extreme. I'd argue the opposite. Sharia law is extreme. It rejects the separation of church and state. It restricts freedom of speech and religion and denies women equal rights under the law. It cannot exist with a system built on liberty, built on equality, and built on individual conscience. Our founders were very clear that freedom survives only when laws are written by elected representatives and applied equally to all. The United States is where faith is freely chosen, not enforced, and where the Constitution, not any religious legal code, governs this country. As we work to secure our borders and defend our sovereignty, we must also defend our values. Americans must be led by their faith, by their intellect, and governed by the United States Constitution, not oppressed by the radicalness of Sharia law. This is why this caucus matters. This is why, as has been said earlier, the enemy is in the gates. This is why we have to stop it now. And by forming this caucus with my fellow elected representatives, we will do so. God bless each and every one of you.
Mr. Fine.
Well, thank you all for being here. Next Monday morning, instead of getting on my normal flight to fly to Washington, I'll go to a courthouse in Florida where I'll be deposed in a criminal case against a man who sent death threats to me and my family. Said, I know where you live. I'm coming to kill you. I'm going to kill your children in front of you. Why did he send me these death threats? By the way, he's the third such person to do so. He sent me these threats while he was overseas and he was arrested by customs on his way into the United States. Why did he send these threats? Because I made a simple statement. If you hear someone yell, praise Jesus, you typically will smile. If you hear someone say, Baruch Hashem, which I may do, you may not know what it means, but you're not going to be afraid. But if someone in this room yelled Allahu Akbar right now, we'd all be looking for a place to hide. Now, this gentleman's excuse, his defense, will be, in my faith, I have the right to go after the infidel. Now, for those of you who think that's crazy, we've seen this before. In Texas, some Muslim children vandalized a church. They sprayed messages on a church. And the civil rights group that supposedly represents mainstream Muslims in Texas says they have the right to do that under the First Amendment because they were practicing their religion. If I could say one thing to my colleagues, we need to not be afraid. We have to stop the term of radical Islam, Islamist. It is mainstream Islam. We have gotten this wrong. The radicals are the ones who don't want to kill us. It is the mainstream that does. And if anyone is concerned about this, look at what I now call the United Islamic Kingdom and Francistan. In France, they had to cancel New Year's Eve celebrations because they were worried about attacks. In the United Islamic Kingdom, they're now debating in Parliament whether cousin marriage should be legal. There are 57 countries in the world that you can live if you want to live under Sharia. Working with my colleagues, we're going to make sure this one is not number 58.
And Mr. Mills.
Thank you. Before I get started, let me just go ahead and point out the facts. My son's mother grew up in the Middle East where her brother was assassinated because of his desire to think in a free manner. And after her father had been threatened repetitively, her father died a week later. You know, this type of thing isn't something that's an anomaly, it's actually the norm. But as my colleagues have talked about, and I've spent many years, both in Iraq, Afghanistan, and in Muslim countries, in many cases they cannot assimilate to the rule of law in our constitutional republic. They don't want to. And you're seeing that when you go through Europe, and you're seeing that when you go through different parts of the world. The Sharia-Free America Caucus sends a necessary message that the United States will not follow the path of appeasement like we see in Europe. Instead, we will defend Western civilization, our constitutional governance, and the freedoms generations of Americans have fought and died to protect. I want to stress that America is not a playground for radicalized ideologies that are contrary to our Constitution. That constitutional framework is what protects liberty, dignity, and opportunity. If you look at places where Sharia has been implemented, it has shown to not be compatible with freedoms or equality, key tenets of the United States. This is not an attack on personal faith. Our Constitution guarantees freedom of religion, and that freedom is sacred. But freedom of religion does not mean freedom to impose a parallel legal system or undermine constitutional governance. No ideology, religious or otherwise, stands above the American law. Wherever Sharia law has been implemented, it has shown to replace individual rights with ideological control, suppresses free speech, subjugates women, and punishes dissent. As a nation, we must be clear-eyed and unapologetic. Not fear of being called an Islamophobe, not fear from being called a racist because you believe in upholding constitutional law. Respect for our law matters, and defending our borders, our legal system, and our shared civic values should be of the utmost importance. I'm proud to stand with my colleagues in this effort, and I will continue to ensure that America remains free, sovereign, and governed by the Constitution alone.
Before we take questions, I want to read you from page 16 and 17. Again, you have the link to the document. The Muslim Brotherhood must understand, the Muslim Brotherhood in America must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their own hands and by the hands of the believers. With that, we'll take questions. Chip, you want to join me? Yes.
Congressman Self, you mentioned there was a neighborhood, I'm guessing near the 3rd District, that was under investigation. Could you talk about that a little bit?
I sure can. Originally called Epic City, which is an extension of the East Plano Islamic Center. It's 400 plus acres in a rural area in my district, the 3rd Congressional District of Texas. They have tried to, by contract law, make it a Muslim only. Now, they will say it's not. But if you have the right, if you're the right person, you can invest. If you're the right person, you can build a house. If you're the right person, you can then sell that house to the right person. That sounds a lot like a Muslim-only community built around a huge mosque. That is exactly, they do not wish to assimilate. They wish to build enclaves. And as I said, they first infiltrate, then they divide, then they conquer. That is their plan. Yes, ma'am.
What are some of your respective committees looking to do in terms of legislation to face this issue, whether it's parallel courts or, for that matter, judges who will see to some of these arguments of freedom of religion?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. I mean, first of all, and I mentioned it before, there is a number of pieces of legislation that some of the folks here on this stage and others have introduced. Randy Fine introduced legislation to ban Sharia in our courts. I believe it's unconstitutional, but I believe that's an important statement to make that Congress should be stating very clearly and plainly that that's the case. He can speak to that bill. I introduced legislation to pull the tax status away from CARE. CARE is directly tied to terrorist activities. They have individuals in their leadership that were unindicted co-conspirators in the Holy Land Foundation case, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, fewer than 25 years ago. I introduced legislation to pause immigration while we vet people for adherence to Sharia law and make a determination as to what that impact is on our country. In addition, next week I'll be holding a hearing as chairman of the subcommittee on the Constitution on Sharia law and its incompatibility with the Constitution of the United States. We're going to have witnesses. We're going to be talking about Epic City. We're going to be talking about some of these enclaves. We're going to be talking about some of the legal issues and some of the direct assaults on our way of life. And that's just the beginning, but those are the first stages of what we've been doing.
I will tell you, in my district, again, when I was the county judge in Collin County, an American court accepted a judgment from a Sharia court. That is what we are trying to preclude. Mr. Fine, do you have any?
No.
Okay.
No, it's okay. You guys go.
What about some of the judges? I know that in the past year, there's been some scrutiny on judges themselves with some looking at
Judiciary.
et cetera. Is that on the table?
Are we talking with respect to Sharia, or are we talking about generally? Or,
Generally,
I mean,
you're talking about rogue judges.
I mean, we have plenty of things to say about rogue judges, and we've certainly been on that position generally, and certainly have supported impeachment of Boasberg and Boardman and other things for other issues. But I would acknowledge that allowing political views to get into the judicial decision making is one of those key issues. Boardman did it, for example, with respect to transgenderism, and then readjusting a sentence downward departing a long ways from what the Department of Justice was seeking with respect to someone who tried to kill the Supreme Court justice. We're fighting this issue in Texas, where Governor Abbott was pushing back, as was noted by one of my colleagues earlier, on at least two instances where there were Sharia courts being put in place in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So we're trying to push on that as far as we can. And any judges that are certainly swearing an oath to the Constitution, whether it's in Texas or anywhere in the country, must adhere to the Constitution and not to Sharia.
And along those lines, I want to quote from the federal oath of office. It says, "I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic." The Texas state oath, the best of my ability to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States. The U.S. military oath, "I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic." That is the issue. Yes.
Message from leadership. Have you gotten any indication which, if any, of these legislative bills
We're not going to get in front of leadership on deciding which bills will move, but obviously the whip was present. Leadership is obviously aware of what we're doing, and I think there's a great deal of growing support of legislation that we've been putting forward and will continue to be. But we'll let the leadership figure out timing.
I will tell you, my bill, Tehran violence bill, against the imams who have fatwas against President Trump by a particularly gruesome sort of torture before execution, passed out of the Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously. There were 2 abstentions, but unanimously. I've talked to the leader, and there's a lot of interest in any bill that comes through a committee unanimously.
So it sounds like some of these issues are state level, a lot of them are state level, and also zoning law. But then can you talk a little bit about online radicalization and how some of these efforts could relate to that, since so many, especially young men who go radical, there's an online component to that may not be touched through some of this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's a core issue. I mean, look, first of all, we see this group as first exposing a lot of the issues, right? So we're having this press conference, we're talking about it, we're elevating the issues, subcommittee hearing next week, bills that we're moving forward, and highlighting those issues. And I would agree that a lot of these are local issues and local impact, but they're very much a federal and national issue. I mean, I think it was Mr. Gill who I think very correctly pointed out the nexus with immigration. I mean, and I understand your point about the online stuff, but there's some major federal components here, including immigration, and our desire to pause immigration and vet people for Sharia law adherence, because Brandon was exactly right. We have imported those who wish to undermine our country, and we should stop doing that, and we should stop doing that immediately. And it's absurd that we're hiding behind supposed cheap labor and, we need high-tech workforce to import people who are directly in conflict with our way of life. Now, we can look at the online stuff, radicalization, all of that, and there's federal nexus there. But we're focusing on these larger issues right now.
As one of the representatives mentioned, Sharia is massive, right? And it's a compendium of centuries of scholarly efforts. So, and a lot of it overlaps with Christian and Jewish beliefs and law systems as well. So on immigration, how would you determine whether a person is a follower of Sharia or not?
Do you want to jump in or no?
I sort of reject the premise that Sharia overlaps a lot with. I can speak to Judaism. I'm not an expert on Christianity. Frankly, I'm probably not an expert on Judaism, but I know enough to say that many of the tenets, the idea of killing those who are not like you, the idea of having relations with small children, the idea of killing someone who chooses to leave the faith, these are not things that overlap with the Jewish faith that I certainly present. And in my faith, it's very hard to become a member. We don't actually just let anybody in. We don't recruit. I don't know, maybe we should, but we don't. And we certainly don't say we're going to kill you if you leave. So I reject the premise of the question that there is a meaningful overlap. And I think you can see in the behavior that those who propagate, it's less about the law and it is more about the values. In this country, we used to bring people in who shared our values, wanted to assimilate, and so they'd add value from day one. Now we bring people in who hate us, want to change us, and want to get all the free stuff that we can. I think that's why Congressman Roy's bill is so important to deal with that. But I reject the premise that there's certainly any overlap between Sharia and Judaism.
Good.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you to my colleagues for being here.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you.